Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 18th of January, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information right here from the National Weather Service. You can call us anytime at 1-800-472-0391. That's the Alaska Weather Information Line. You can get your daily forecast there, as well as any active weather information that you should be concerned about there. Weather.gov/Alaska is how you find us online, and if you have any questions about what you were finding or what you can find, please let me know. I'm happy to help you anytime. David.Snider@NOAA.gov. Let's get right to it. Winter weather advisories are posted for a great many areas in the north, including Fairbanks, where it is actively snowing right now. Already more than 2 to 3 inches of snow on the ground. We expect a winter weather advisory to continue at least until 9 o'clock, and that's about the point where the snow should start to taper off this evening. Expecting upwards of about 4 to 6 inches in total from this passing wave of snow. As colder air is dropping southward, it's also blowing a lot of the snow that's already on the ground into the air, with west winds up to around 40 miles per hour for many locations that you see colored in yellow here. But there is one area that's getting just a little bit more wind, and that would be the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Winds there up to about 50 miles per hour, and a blizzard warning is now in effect. That'll continue until Saturday morning, so all day tomorrow and then into early Saturday morning around 6 o'clock before conditions should start to ease up a little bit. Elsewhere, we're looking at winter weather advisories in general through Friday across the western Arctic coast and the Beaufort Seacoast, and then kind of slowly diminishing from west to east through Friday night and then again into Saturday morning for our eastern areas. And winter weather advisories also for areas around Deering specifically, not all of the interior of the Seward Peninsula, but specifically Deering. It looks like that'll go until about 9 o'clock as well. Your issue as well is blowing snow and poor visibility. That should improve after about 9 o'clock tonight. So colder air is dropping southward. Remember, we were talking about that. The winter's cold is making a comeback. And this is just the first stage of this. As this first round of big, deep cold is dropping southward, we're getting that changeover, and snow and wind will be a result of those cooler, dense winds, colder air dropping southward. This will continue to push southward all the way through the weekend, but it's not just this weekend. There's another big surge of that cold that's going to move in later next week. And as we were talking about yesterday, areas in southwestern Alaska from Bethel all the way into the western interior, up the Kuskokwim, perhaps even in the Kobuk-Noatak valleys and the Norton Sound region, could be looking at temperatures that are colder than about 20 to 30 degrees below the average there, depending on where you are. Of course, everyone's got a different average temperature, but using McGrath as a good example, if the high temperature on average is close to 0 normally this time of the year, and the low temperature is normally close to 15 below, you could be looking at temperatures that are 25 to 30 degrees colder than that for the late period next weekend into the weekend. So there's more cold on the way, so just make sure you're prepared for it. Here's a look at the satellite picture as we look at the last 12 hours or so from this Thursday. You can see low pressure sitting south of southeastern Alaska. This weather system is going to just kind of sit here and try and gather some more moisture and sling that northward. Keep in mind, as it's doing that, it's been creating rain across southern parts of southeast. What do you think is going to happen as this big cold starts coming southward and this low pressure system isn't moving much? It's probably going to snow. It's probably going to snow in places like Juneau and especially central and southern southeast as this moisture is going to work its way up. So keep your eye on the forecast, especially if snow is not your friend in southeast. But if you're a snow lover, keep your eye on the forecast, because there's going to be a much better chance that precipitation in southeast late this weekend and into next week, there's going to be a much better chance it's going to be snow in your area. Now, as we look up north, you can see a lot of the low gray clouds here across the Yukon Valley. Let's put this in motion one more time. An elongated trough sitting right across the north coast is allowing this colder air to flow in from the north and the west, fill in behind this, and that kind of discrepancy and lingering low pressure across the interior is allowing snow to form. And again, we've already had snow falling for a good chunk of the day in Fairbanks. Probably looking at somewhere on the order of 4 to 6 inches again as we head through the evening hours. A lot of wind along this boundary too, and that's where we're getting those winds up to 40 and 50 miles per hour for the north slope. Now, cold air will continue to drain through the Bering Strait, and for those watching the sea ice, this is good news. We should see some pretty quick formation of ice in places that have not had a whole lot of ice, mainly north of St. Lawrence Island and into the Bering Strait. So watch for changes there. Holes in the Bering Sea around the Norton Sound region will probably close up a little bit more, and we'll likely get into some more coastal ice across southwestern Alaska. This is all wind dependent, though. Remember, the winds are pouring out of the north, and as they stay strong, it gets harder for that ice to form. But the part that's going to be a lot different than before is we're going to have significantly colder weather dropping southward as a result. Now, there's a trough of low pressure sitting across the southern Bering Sea and across the North Pacific as well. You can see that spiraling action here out across the western Bering. These waves of low pressure will continue to work their way in from the west, but the real action is going to be that northerly flow coming out of the Arctic there. So let's take a look at the surface chart. Here's our low up across the western Arctic coast at 994 millibars, just south of Wainwright. Another trough sitting across the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. High pressure is trying to stay put. That's locking in the previous round of cold across the interior, and as that moisture has been lingering through, that's what's creating the snow across parts of the central and middle Tanana Valley. Once again, low pressure sitting south of Haida Gwaii at 969 millibars. That's sloshing rain just up toward Haida Gwaii, not quite reaching Ketchikan, Metlakatla, or Craig right now. As you look out toward the south and west, some snow showers there for the southwest coast and into St. Lawrence Island, and another wave of low pressure here across the western Bering Sea. As we get into tonight, still looks like rain for most in southeast, southern southeast, that is. Most areas in the north are going to be fairly clear, including Haines, Skagway, Juneau, Gustavus. You're looking pretty good there. VFR conditions, in fact, for tomorrow, as you'll see in the flying weather segment coming up. Look for the eastern interior to deal with more of the snow than anywhere else. Probably accumulating snow from Fairbanks and eastward, though the heaviest seems to be around the Fairbanks region right now. For the north slope, it's going to be winds more than snow. You're looking at winds at 40 to 50 miles per hour, so poor visibility is going to be an issue at least through about 6 a.m. to about noontime tomorrow for the western Arctic coast, and then gradually diminishing from west to east through Friday, and then into Saturday morning for places like Kaktovik. For Bristol Bay, look for snow showers to continue, and once again, when you see those crossed arrows, that means blowing snow. So it may not be actively snowing from a cloud, but the poor visibility there is how we're representing the weather. So it looks like the winds will be moving through the region, especially the west coast tonight and into tomorrow, and as a result of that, poor visibility may be a problem from time to time, but if it gets really bad, you'll know, as suggested by a winter weather advisory from your local weather forecast office there. In this case, that would be Fairbanks. For the central and eastern chain, look for snow showers to continue. As we get into Friday, another surge of colder air is building into the north. Those temperatures will begin to drop. You're going to see that on the temperature chart here in just a minute. It is substantial. It is a big change. And out across southern parts of southeast, still a little bit of rain sloshing in around the region. We rebuild our area of low pressure across the Gulf down to 988 millibars. It's got some cold air wrapped in on it, and that means areas of rain and snow showers may be possible. The bulk of the snow, any accumulating snow, remains across the central and eastern interior, and we'll still have some possibilities of snow from Cape Newenham out toward the Pribilofs and southward toward the Alaska Peninsula. And just barely, you get a glimpse of the next weather system out there that's trying to work its way into the Bering. But what's in control? The big cold, high pressure at 1,034 millibars there, just north and west of St. Matthew. A little disturbance will sneak in there. That should create some light snow for the western parts of the Seward Peninsula and the northern areas of the Yukon Delta. Maybe. It'll be close. But once again, the main section of accumulating snow is still working its way out of the eastern interior and the north slope. So here's Saturday morning, and we'll still be talking about winds Friday night and into early Saturday as conditions start to improve there. That really tight pressure gradient we saw across the north slope should be gone by Saturday, but look at where it's forming now. We've got tight pressure gradient here, the lines of pressure, the isobars getting closer and closer together across south central, across the Alaska Peninsula, near Kodiak, and also across northern parts of southeast and Prince William Sound, as well as the Copper River Valley. That's going to mean those outflow winds should start to come up, and as temperatures are dropping, it's not going to feel really good. There might be some wind chills that make your Saturday a little bit less comfortable in some locations there. So we'll keep an eye on that, but count on it getting colder wherever you are. And out across the west, that next front is already merging with the cold air, and so what looked like a pretty healthy weather system is starting to wrap in on itself. And for the central and western chain, it looks like areas of rain mixed with snow for Kiska, maybe Adak, and out toward Shemya there. That is a look at the weather pattern. But remember, we're still talking about that slug of cold air coming in from the Arctic, so several waves of this. Let's get to what's coming in tonight. As we get into the overnight hours, 20s and 30s and still mild for southeast, south central teens and 20s, Kodiak 28 degrees, 19 in Kenai, around 2 below in Fairbanks after the snow stops. Many across the north and west slopes, we'll be looking at 5 to 15, even 20 below out around Wainwright and points south. Around the Seward Peninsula, 5 to 10 below. Galena, you're looking at about 7 below. Grayling, areas around Anvik, 5 to 10 below. Bethel, you're looking at 2 below. Bristol Bay, temperatures back in the mid-teens. The Alaska Peninsula in the upper 20s. 31 around Unalaska, 23 in Dutch Harbor. High temperatures tomorrow, more cold. Look at 5 to 15 below for the north coast. 8 above in Kaktovik. Again, as winds stay up and the clouds stay put, that'll keep your temperatures up for a little longer. Anywhere from 5 to 10 above for the middle Tanana Valley. Eagle looking at 13, 20s for South Central and the Kenai Peninsula, 34 in Cordova, mid to upper 30s and low 40s for Southeast. Still mild ahead of the next push of cold air, and low 30s for most of the Alaska Peninsula. Teens for Bristol Bay, 10 around Nunivak Island, 15 in Savunga, 29 in St. Paul and St. George, and 34 for Unalaska. As we get into Saturday morning, much colder, anywhere from 5 below to 20 below for many in the interior. 21 below, it looks like, for areas around Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. 20s and 30s for Southeast, 27 for Kodiak, teens and 20s for the Alaska Peninsula, near 30 for many in the chain. High temperatures on Saturday, still getting colder, anywhere from 1 below in Fairbanks to 6 below in Kaktovik, 13 below for Prudhoe Bay. Kotzebue Sound temperatures 5 to 10 below, 9 above in Nome. And remember, this kind of cold is really dependent on the cloud cover. If we have clouds, it will stay warmer. Look for 5 to 15 below across southwestern Alaska, 32 in Kodiak, teens for the Kenai Peninsula and South Central, and 30s to low 40s for many in Southeast, still holding on to the last grasps of warm air.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to aviation weather now, and your flying weather. IFR conditions are expected across the Beaufort Seacoast, along the Brooks Range, and across the upper Tanana Valley there, all the way into the upper Yukon, and along the Alaska Range, generally on the northern side of this, where colder air is dropping southward and lowering ceilings and visibility. There's also exiting snow that's been moving across the north and north central parts of our state since yesterday, and you can see by Friday afternoon it doesn't really change very much. We'll see a widespread area of MVFR across southeast, all the way across the northern Gulf, Kodiak Island, and across the southern Bering Sea, with a little bit of IFR across the Bering Sea coast of the Alaska Peninsula. Again, this is the cold air that's dropping southward that's creating that change in visibility and ceiling. As we go through Saturday morning, IFR will continue around the middle and upper Tanana valleys, as well as the upper Yukon, and patchy areas just offshore of the Beaufort Seacoast. For southeast, not a whole lot of change. MVFR conditions there, but northern areas like Chilkoot and White Pass might still sneak out with VFR conditions. MVFR stretches all the way through south central, the Kodiak Island region, the Alaska Peninsula, and the chain, with increasing areas of IFR out across the western chain by Saturday afternoon. You can see that band moving north and east with the next frontal boundary there. MVFR conditions expected across central and southern parts of the Panhandle, most of south central, generally east of the Parks Highway, to the west in the Susitna Valley and the western Alaska Range passes. VFR conditions should be expected for Saturday afternoon, and watch for IFR down the Alcan border, pretty much from, let's say, Arctic Village through Fort Yukon, through Eagle, and down to about Northway, and just west to almost Fairbanks or so, and IFR conditions expected around Tanita Pass and north and south of that point. Let's take a look at your pass conditions then for your Friday. Anaktuvik and Anigan Pass, we both expect to see IFR conditions lasting really through most of the day, but if this moves a little bit faster, improvement could be noted from west to east during the day. We'll still be looking at IFR conditions fairly widespread in the north, though, through early Saturday morning. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass expected to be MVFR. There will be some improvement as we get into your Saturday. Rainy Pass expected to lean over to IFR, and that's mainly going to be on the northern side. You're going to see some of the worst changes, lower visibility and ceilings there on the northern side. Windy Pass will be flirting with IFR on the northern side as well. Generally, MVFR conditions expected. Isabel Pass, more of the same. MVFR to IFR conditions, generally the worst on the north side once again for your daytime tomorrow. Mentasta Pass looks like MVFR. IFR a little bit further north of the pass, but the pass region itself looks to be generally MVFR. Tanita Pass will start out at VFR and may lean over toward marginal conditions as the afternoon gets late. Portage Pass also expected to see some improvement there, as the Prince William Sound side seems to be looking a little bit better. And Chilkoot and White Pass should be okay. However, points to the south of Juneau will likely get into MVFR fairly quickly. Here's a look at the freezing levels now, and you can see the cold air is on the way. It's pushing the surface freezing line all the way down to the northern Gulf, right over the central sections of southeast, with the freezing levels aloft around 2,000 to 4,000 feet. Most areas in southeast will be at or above 2,000 feet, but the rest of the state is pretty much sub-freezing, with the exceptions of the Aleutian chain there, all the way from Akitan westward towards Shemya. As far as icing potential goes, we've got several different levels here. I'm going to try and explain this to you today. Up north of the Brooks Range, levels above 4,000 feet is where we get into ideal ice growth regions there. But south of the Brooks Range, we're talking about levels below 6 to about 9,000 feet. That's across the central and southern parts of South Central and areas across the upper Tanana Valley and the upper Yukon Valley, below 9,000 feet. For southeast, it's going to be above 7,000 feet. And out west, the levels drop down significantly there. The moisture is a little bit closer to the surface, so above 3,000 feet around the Pribilofs to a little bit more above 4,000 feet as you get toward the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island region. You do notice a pretty sharp boundary here across the midsections of Alaska. That's that really cold, dry air moving in that's scrubbing out a lot of the moisture. Here's the jet stream, and our upside down U-shaped pattern here is what's going to allow cold air to drop in across the west coast and the North Slope as we go through Friday and into the weekend. Trough of low pressure moving into western parts of North America. You can see at 9,000 feet, northerlies already connecting up with Alaska, anywhere from 20 to about 40 knots coming in from the north. Northwesterlies for the North Slope, still holding on to light southerlies across the north and eastern Gulf. You see that here at 3,000 feet. Southeasterlies about 15 to 20, but on the west coast, wind speeds already coming up to 40 to 50 knots for the northwest coast. And high pressure anchor just south of St. Lawrence Island will drive that cold into the Aleutians as well, anywhere from 20 to about 40 knots there from the north. So turbulence potential is really going to be watching those northerly winds come across the west coast. Considerable moderate there, generally below 4,000 feet. Some light chop on the Beaufort Sea coast. Moderate turbulence around St. Lawrence Island and the western Aleutians also below 4,000 feet. More in your marine weather in just a moment.
The winter football. Hey there, stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. We're here to help you find your way around the winter sky. This is perfect stargazing weather.
And perfect football weather.
The most distinguishing feature of the winter sky is a star pattern called the winter hexagon. It covers almost half the sky, incorporates 6 constellations, and 8 of the 20 brightest stars visible from Earth. The winter hexagon definitely puts its stamp on the season.
But in honor of the NFL playoffs and the upcoming big game, I recommend changing its name to the winter football. When you step outside and see the clear winter sky, you'll know what I'm talking about. Let's show you.
Okay, we have our sky set up for 9 p.m. looking southeast. Look at all those bright stars. If you can brave the cold, a ring of sparkling multicolored jewels will shine down on you.
Some call this the winter circle or winter hexagon, but I think these stars look like a giant football flying through the air, pointing on 2 ends, rounded in the middles. And winter is the season for football.
Exactly. And the main player inside the winter football is Orion the Hunter. Easily recognized by the 3 stars that make his snazzy belt. Orion stands about halfway up in the southeastern sky, looking like a hulking linebacker about to make a tackle.
Now let's take a tour around the winter football. Begin with the brightest star in the sky. This is the dog star named Sirius. If you connect the dots of Orion's belt, continue that line down and to the left, you can't miss it. Sirius is a brilliant white star and one of our closest stellar neighbors. Following our football theme, Sirius marks the nose of one of our 2 team mascots, the big dog or Canis Major. In Greek mythology, Canis Major was one of Orion's great hunting dogs.
Orion's other hunting dog and our other team mascot can be found up and to the left of Sirius, around the bright star Procyon. Procyon is a yellow-white star in the constellation Canis Minor, the little dog.
Keep going up and to the left and you'll find 2 stars of similar brightness. These are the 2 heads of the Gemini twins, Pollux and Castor. Both twins were incredibly athletic and would make a great quarterback-wide receiver combo.
Now let's go along the other side of the winter football. The bright star nearest the zenith and at the tip of the football is called Capella. Capella is the brightest star in the constellation Auriga the Charioteer. Auriga could serve as a coach and chauffeur to the football team. Greek myths described him as the inventor of the chariot. But he also was good at giving advice and can look over the field from his position high in the sky.
Moving down and to the right, we'll come to a bright orange star. This is Aldebaran, the glowing eye of Taurus the bull. Now, I realize there's no pro football team called the Bulls.
How about the Buffalo Bills?
All right, close enough.
Okay. The last star in the football is the bright blue star Rigel. This marks the left foot of our buddy Orion as one of the truly amazing stars in our galaxy. It's around 800 light years away from us and is still one of the brightest stars. It must be humongous.
Finally, you're back around to Sirius. Congratulations, you've traced the winter football in the sky. Look for it after dark for the next few months. But what's that bright star in the middle of the football?
That is the infamous Betelgeuse, a red supergiant star that makes even Rigel look puny. Let's compare Rigel to our sun in size. They're not even close. Now, let's compare Betelgeuse to Rigel.
Yikes, Betelgeuse is even larger than the Earth's orbit.
That means that if Betelgeuse was our sun, we'd be orbiting inside of it.
Good thing we're far, far away from it.
So, tonight, take a break from the NFL and go out and see the big game in the sky. Look for the bright stars in the winter football: Sirius, Procyon, Pollux, and Castor on one side,
And Capella, Aldebaran, and Rigel on the other side. The winter football has more big stars than any pro team, and they're available to you every night until baseball season when you keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time for a quick check of your sea ice edge. Already with the cold air that is already moving southward, we can already see some changes occurring across areas north of the Bering Strait and just north of St. Lawrence Island. Watch for a lot of this to change as we head through the weekend and even more colder air drops southward. The same will be true for areas around Norton Sound and the YK coast. One thing that will keep this in check a little bit, though, will be the amount of wind pouring through. Sea surface temperatures are primed and ready here, but with wind moving, that could disrupt some of the ice formation across some of the western coast. Even so, it looks like growth is more of an option than any reduction at this point. So watch for changes. Anytime you want to track those changes, head to weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Here's a look at the forecast now for southeast. Northerlies will continue across the inside passage, 10 to 20 knots or so with 2 to 4 foot seas. Onshore winds will be light, but coming in from the north and west there across Sound, anywhere from 9 to 10 foot seas. Northwesterlies 10 to 12 with higher winds there just outside of Craig and Metlakatla and into the Dixon entrance there for Friday. For Saturday, remember we've got that push of colder air. That's going to start building up on the interior, and as that pressure gradient tightens up, watch for more wind to start to get squeezed through those gaps and channels, and because of that, gusts are going to come up around the Lynn Canal, up to 45 knots or so. Northerlies 30 knots with 6 foot seas there, 30 knots sustained, and 20 to 25 out of the north for most of the inside passage. 4 to 5 foot seas, and an offshore wind develops. Notice the strengthening winds here, 15 to 25 knots, anywhere from 7 to 11 foot seas across the outside coast. For Friday in south central, 10 knots in Cook Inlet, looking for north and northwesterlies, 20 to 25 across the Prince William Sound and the northern Gulf, only 10 knots there. Small seas inside Prince William Sound as well, 2 foot seas there expected for Friday. Similar conditions there on Saturday, more of a northerly wind at 15. 15 to 30 knots across the northern Gulf. You're looking at 20 to 30 knots across the central and southern parts of Cook Inlet on Saturday. Some of the stronger winds right over the Barren Islands as usual. 5 to 7 foot seas expected there on Saturday. Inside Bristol Bay, 25 knots from the north with a 5 foot sea. Look for 7 foot seas down the coast and higher seas west of Togiak and just south and east of the Pribilofs there. So watch for those seas to come up to about 10 to 15 feet there. Northerlies inside of Chillicothe Strait, 15 to 25 down the Pacific coastline. You're looking at 6 to 11 foot seas on Friday. By Saturday, some of those higher seas are making their way toward the Alaska Peninsula. Seas ranging from about 15 to 20 feet in this area. Closer to Cold Bay, you're looking at about 13 feet with northerlies at 30 knots there inside of Bristol Bay and a little bit of ice forming across the region. Northwesterlies inside of Chillicothe Strait, 25 knots, 5 to 9 foot seas on either side of Kodiak Island, up to 10 foot seas south of Perryville and Sand Point with northerlies at 30 on Saturday. Across the Aleutians, north and northwesterly winds across the central and eastern chain, 6 to 8 foot seas on the Bering Sea coast, about 11 foot seas on the Pacific coast. An east and southeasterly flow for the western chain, 25 to 35 knots. All of this wrapping around high pressure to the north as that colder air drops south through the pressure gradient increases, heading into low pressure to your west and southwest. So that means 40 to 45 knots for places like Kiska and Attu. 22 to 25 foot seas expected there on that 40 to 45 knot wind. Gales coming up for many, and watch for the winds to pick up for the central and eastern chain there, 25 to 30 knots with 11 to 13 foot seas along the Bering Sea coast and 7 to 15 foot seas across the Pacific coast on Saturday. For the west coast, northerlies and cold air dropping southward, a north and northeast flow for Nunivak Island, St. Matthew region, and St. Paul and St. George with 10 foot seas there on a 30 knot wind from the north and east. Northerlies over Norton Sound, over the ice there and filling in even more, as we said, 20 knots there on Friday, up to 10 knots on Saturday as winds diminish. Look for more of a light westerly flow to come into Amonik and south of St. Lawrence Island. North and northeasterlies continue for Nunivak Island and the Pribilof, still looking at 20 to 30 knots with seas holding around 5 to 10 feet on Saturday. For the North Slope, westerlies and strong at times. Blizzard conditions continue around the Kaktovik region, expecting that warning to continue till Saturday morning. Winter weather advisories for the rest of the North Slope coastline. Winds may gust up to about 40 miles per hour. You'll see those conditions improving from west to east from Friday night and into early Saturday morning. For Kotzebue Sound, 20 knots from the north and west, and winds diminish a little bit more on Saturday. You can still see some of the stronger winds there around Kaktovik and Prudhoe Bay from the west at about 20 to 25. Recapping tonight's weather, we are expecting about 3 inches of snow and strong gusty winds here. Blizzard conditions for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Elsewhere, reduced visibility and occasional snowfall, but the greatest threat for poor weather conditions would be around Kaktovik. Winter weather advisories posted for Fairbanks. You've had about 3 inches of snow, maybe a little more by now in the afternoon, and looking at about 5 to 6 inches of snow by the time it's all said and done. Around 9 o'clock, conditions should improve. Southeast still looking at some snow, perhaps as we head into early next week with colder air coming your way. A lot of cold air coming down the west coast as well. Bundle up and stay warm, and thanks for watching Alaska Weather. We'll see you right here again tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.